welcome to our latest episode of Good Trouble, a series from the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at San Jose State University that was named after a quote and inspiration from the Honorable John Lewis, late congressman from the United States. Do not get lost in a sea of despair. Be hopeful, be optimistic. Our struggle is not the struggle of a day, a week, or a month, or a year. It is the struggle of a lifetime. Never ever be afraid to make some noise and get in good trouble, necessary trouble. And so I want to spend some time with my colleagues, the staff at ODEI here at San Jose State University, who are part of this team, who I think have led lives and careers of getting into good trouble at times when they've had the opportunity, and at times where they've had to make the opportunity for themselves to do that, to work on behalf of others and on behalf of communities. And so I'm really delighted today to do an in-house interview. If you've seen parts of our other series, we've invited other people who are colleagues and allies on campus, as well as people who have done some really formative work on social justice and equity, United States as well as globally. And so I'm going to start by having members of our staff introduce themselves briefly to tell us who they are, as well as how long they've been here at San Jose State University and what their role is here at San Jose State University. And then I'll ask some more formative questions. So I'm going to start by asking Felicia to introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Felicia McKee-Fagans. I have been at San Jose State almost 16 years. In September, it'll be 16. I've been with the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for a year in July. And I also did my master's here while I was working, master's in education in 2009.
Thank you. Thanks, Felicia. And next we'll have Craig.
Hey, I'm Craig. I have been on campus for, I guess, a little over 2.5 years, something like that. And I serve as our diversity and inclusion trainer / educator.
Great. Thank you. And next we'll have Patience.
Hi, I'm Patience. I serve as our Director for Black and African American Equity. This is an inaugural role. I started this position in December, but what brought me to California was for about 4 years, I worked at Long Beach State as a Director of Student Conduct.
Great, thank you. And Fernanda.
Hola, buenas tardes. My name is Fernanda Perdomo-Arciniegas. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am the Deputy Diversity Officer. I've been at San Jose State University for 19 years. Next year will be my 20th anniversary. But I also, as Felicia, I was a student, undergrad and grad, undergrad in mathematics and grad studies in public administration.
Great, thank you. And I'm Kathy Wong-Lau, Chief Diversity Officer. I've been here 5 years, so really excited to be here. So I'm going to start by asking a question, because I know that some people who are viewing this show may be students or maybe early career staff or faculty or other folks. And so would love to ask, sometimes the questions I get asked are, how did you end up in this work? What motivates you? What was your path? And the reason why I want all of you to share is because I think sometimes people have a stereotype or idea that somehow you knew exactly what you wanted to do and you wanted the type of role that you have, and you planned right away from when you were 18 years old and you got here. And we know that, of course, that our paths are quite a lot more circuitous, and sometimes we have stops and we have detours. And so would love to have you talk about that and how that may have contributed maybe to the wisdom and experience and your approach to the work. So I'm going to actually just call on people. So I'm going to call on Dr. Patience Bryant first. So let's hear from you.
Well, it's so funny you said at 18. So 20 years ago this month, I was an incoming freshman at Florida Atlantic University with the idea that I was going to be a print journalist. I love to consume information. I love to share it. I'm far from being a print journalist. However, I still love to consume and share information. I got into diversity, equity, inclusion work by working in higher education. I went through the pathway of going through student conduct. I have a passion for doing restorative justice work as well as other conflict resolution work, and that's how I ended up doing student conduct. I also got heavily involved in supporting individuals who may experience bias incidents and responding to bias and training individuals on how to form bias response teams. So that is how I got into DEI work accidentally. and it carried through to this role. To do restorative justice, you have to be aware of identity. You have to create space for stories to be shared. And that's what we do in our office. We create space, we share stories, we share information, and we talk about who we are and how can we work together.
Great, great. Thank you. Great. Next, can we have Craig, Dr. Craig Alamo, if you can share.
Sure. Oh gosh. So I got into this work. I've been doing social justice educational stuff for about over 20 years, and I was I think there's a number of things that led me to it. I was a history major and a philosophy minor, and I found myself curious about the history of social inequality in different cultures around the world. Had a particular bent. I thought I was going to do Soviet studies or Russian studies at one point in my life, and then I thought I was going to do study around the history and philosophy of science and technology when I came across the work of Thomas Kuhn, believe it or not, reading The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. I know, it's bizarre. But this concept that he talked about primarily in this book was around paradigms and the ideas that paradigms, how they sort of like baked in political power and the way in which that we have approached science throughout our history. And these things sort of pushed me in a particular direction. Was also, I guess, a hyperactive student as an undergrad, and found my way into student affairs work. And those things sort of combined together in a way that where I found that there were functional areas in student affairs work doing social justice educational stuff, but wanted to do it not as sort of a part of my job, but as like, mixing some of my passions and my full-time work. Right. So I continue to try to find different places to do it. When I was in my master's program at Northeastern University, I had the opportunity to work with this guy, Jackson Katz, who was doing work with male college student athletes doing anti-sexism work. And I found myself in that space. As like, oh, this is a place with the identities that I have where I might be able to have a space, and B, maybe even have an impact. So I kind of continue to do that through study at the University of Massachusetts and their social justice ed program, and then going on to do more professionally and paraprofessionally until I was able to land some full-time work after getting my doctorate, which brought me to the West Coast, as I used to work at UC Berkeley doing this work. So there you go.
Thank you.
Believe it or not, the Reader's Digest version.
Thanks. Great. Felicia, Miss Felicia.
Sure. So I accidentally got into DEI work. I didn't know that I was really doing DEI work. When I was an undergraduate, I thought I want to go into counseling and work with students, help them get into college. And when I got out of that and ended up in my master's program, I thought, wait, students get into college, they don't stay in college. So how do I affect that? And all the time working, I had always worked doing administrative assistant type stuff. My first job was working in the attendance office in high school. So I've always done office work. So I was doing office work as an assistant when I was doing my master's program. And, that's something that I'm really good at. So very proficient. But I also felt like I needed to contribute to the campus, because what's the point of being here with all these students if I never interact with them? So I volunteered on task forces, and I also advised student organizations and did work primarily with Black student orgs, but I also worked with Greek Life and looked at some of the practices they had, and ensuring that the Black Greeks and the historically underrepresented groups had some of the same advantages as the historically white groups, because we're structured totally different. And being a member, I knew that, and having the experience of working with some of those groups as an undergraduate, I thought, hey, if they need volunteers, why not? So I kind of fell into the work as a volunteer because I just felt like it was important, it was fun. And if I had the opportunity to stand up for somebody who couldn't, then I was supposed to do that. And that's just the way I was raised. So as I was working and this opportunity opened itself up, and I got into this position, and I was thinking, I don't really know that much about DEI work. And someone told me, yeah, you do it all the time. And so it was kind of reframing what I knew about myself. And it was like, oh, I never really thought about it. I was already doing all that. And I have friends who do that. But it was just something, you know, we volunteer, you don't think anything of it. And then learning more and more about the field, it's just become much more interesting. So having a dual role as an executive assistant, which I can do because I've done that type of work before, and then learning more specifically about being a diversity program specialist and doing more of the training around DEI and showing people how to do what I just naturally did has been fun so far.
Great. Ditto, it has been fun to work with all of you. Yeah, great. And then we have Fernanda.
Yes. Well, like my process to working on in the office of ODI has been kind of like a circle. When I started my higher ed, I studied in Colombia. I actually went to school to be a lawyer. So if you know the Greek root for lawyer is advocate. In Spanish is abogado. That comes from advocate to advocate. And the idea was for me, because I wanted to really help people, right? And when I was in my studies, I realized that I loved the theory, but I didn't like the practice. And love the history of law, love the theory of law, but when it came down to practice law in Colombia, I was very disappointed. So at the time that I was having kind of like that crisis with my career and what I was going to do with life, an opportunity was presented to me to come to the United States and study English, right? So that we're talking about 1996. And at the time, the situation in Colombia was really bad. A lot of lawyers and people who were working in social issues were being either killed or disappeared. And I really felt afraid for my life at that time. So when I came to the United States, I started my studies. I also changed kind of like my life because I met my husband and I got married. And that's how I started my life in the United States. I also was very afraid to go back into social issues because I was hurt in a way. And so when I started my career at San Jose State, I went into something that it was like logic, that had complete, it was clean, that I didn't have to, weigh some issues. So I went into mathematics. So my undergrad studies at San Jose State are in mathematics. And I really love the classes and the challenge, but it was not my passion, even though I absolutely love the faculty, so much so that when I graduated, I started working in the Office of Mathematics. And that's when I started my career at San Jose State. And I worked in the academic side of the university for 7 years. And then an opportunity presented to work in the unit of student affairs as an undergrad manager for admissions. And that's how I started my life in student affairs. And I would say that the circle is when I started after that working in the office of the Vice President for Student Affairs, and I started focusing with the students that were undocumented. And as an immigrant, I realized that I had a lot of privilege. And I did not know a lot about these communities. So the students taught me so much. And that's when I said, I cannot be isolated from all the stuff that are happening, surrounding me. And, kind of felt that I ran away from the situation that I was in my country. So here I decided that I wanted to have a voice for those people that didn't have a voice. And that's how for several years I worked with undocumented students. Then my path opened up a little bit more to work in community work as community director of campus and community relations. And I work with several families to bring families, the Latino families in particular, to the campus through several conferences that we put together in the unit of student affairs. And then 4 years ago, I had the opportunity to join Kathy in this very newly formed office and continue to work on the issues that were part of the, kind of like bring the perspective of the community into this office that it was newly formed. As well as the voices of those people that perhaps were not heard or they were not being heard on campus and outside. So I think the advocacy part has always been with me, and that's how I feel that that's my role here in this office.
Great, thank you, great. So, so some of you have taken a little bit of time to talk about what drives you and how your identity plays and everything. So I want to give a chance to patients to maybe flesh out a little bit to talk about, how does your identity, how does your background inform the work that you do? So you shared a little bit about your educational background and your journey and the different roles that you've had, but can you share a little bit, because this might be inspirational to students and to staff and faculty who are interested in our work?
I always share, I'm a proud Miamian. I'm from Miami, Florida. Born and raised, the bulk of my family still in South Florida. My family derives from Americus, Georgia. So we consider ourselves to be true Southerners, in many ways. And that definitely thrives and drives who I am. From a proud family of domestic workers, folks who own land, work the field, but also educators. My father integrated schools in Miami. My father is a first generation college student. He is a preacher. Most of our work, he's been a pastor of the same church since I was 2 years old. So most of our work has been service work, community work, giving back to the community that he was raised in as a young child. And we've always been very active. I still remember my first protest I was able to skip school for. We went to Tallahassee in 2000 to protest that election. I remember it. My parents never let me miss school, and they're like, we're going to do this. And that definitely drove my activism side. But we always had, my parents always had the intent that you give back and you do service. And being a Black woman, my parents, my grandparents, they never hid the world from us. I have 2 older sisters, I have nieces, and they made it very clear how the world would perceive us and how do we arm ourselves, how to prepare ourselves, and how you lift as you climb. So that definitely has influenced who I am today as a personally and professionally. I definitely am very mindful of my position on campus, my education privileges, and when I have the opportunity to take up space, I do that a lot because I'm doing it for someone else who's not there in that room and not part of that conversation.
Great. Thank you. I'm gonna ask another question, and this is so I'm changing tactics here. So a little bit. What is the most challenging thing? I know there's a lot of challenging things. You have to think hard to prioritize which one you want to talk about. So, what is the most challenging aspect of your role in ODEI? So in the work that you do, when you think of the scope of the work that you do, we serve a lot of folks on campus. We do a lot of consulting. We intake a lot of calls. Sometimes it's based on experiences that people have. Sometimes it's based on needs that people have. And so they want us to come in and consult or do trainings or coach people or whatever it is. So what's difficult about your work? What's challenging? And then how do you draw on resources to respond to it? That was a big question.
I will say that just because I kind of like name myself the historian of the group because I've been here the longest. I think that one of the realizations that I had in the last few months really is to kind of like, how do you balance the knowledge that you have about the campus and the history of the university with the needs of the people that want some change immediately, right? And so I think that it is important for me to also understand that, yeah, it is important, the context and the history and things that have happened, but I also have to be very open to the needs and the immediacy of the necessities that people are actually claiming for. So I would say that for me, that's the hardest, kind of how to balance that with also the few resources that we have, and how do we convey a message that, yes, we're working on it, yes, we know it's important, as well as kind of like give the context of this is something that is being institutional and structural, and it needs kind of change to happen. And I was just thinking really recently about something where, for example, just to share with the group, is it took the university almost 10 years of dialogues and people talking and protesting about a food pantry. And when it happened, it is great to have a food pantry on campus, but just to get there, it took us almost 10 years. So I think that for me is that knowing the history, knowing the struggle, but also doing something that is immediate and that has results, and people can actually feel that the university is doing something.
Great, thank you.
I think my student conduct background you learn early on in student conduct that don't take things personally, that you learn easily how to shut off emotion. You learn quickly how not to take home cases with you because you have to deal with some very hard things. And I think that serves me well in this role, but also it is not a complete barrier. My position is to support Black people. I'm a Black person. So I'm supporting the community, but I'm also among the community. And there are times where, as anything that's impacting the community is directly impacting me, but I still have to do my job. And so I have to learn how to remove and separate. I've had to learn how to remove and separate myself, my role from my community position. And sometimes I think people think it's easier because I am with my own community. And like, sometimes I think it's harder because I see and I understand, but similar to what Fernanda said, there are processes, there are things that are out of our control. So sometimes it can be difficult when you know what your community needs, but you can't do anything to actually change it.
I'm going to tag on to what Patience is saying, because for me, being in this role for a year, it's hard to shake it off sometimes and not take things personal. Because before I was in advancement, that's fundraising, that wasn't really personal. But this, you encounter a lot of heavy stuff. And at the end of the day, I need to go shake it off and go play with my 2-year-old. I need to talk to my friends and think about something other than what's going on in the office or on campus or the phone calls we got. And so that has been my toughest struggle. Another thing with our community is sometimes they only see their one perspective, but working with a higher part of our administration, I can see multiple perspectives and trying to get people to understand that either way, either having people who are higher understand where the general group is coming from, or telling the general group, that's not quite right. And we are working on that. Finding a balance, because you find yourself being labeled a go-to Black person, or, well, they just know you and that's why they're talking to you, when that's not necessarily the case. I witness these different things going on, and some things I can't tell everyone about. Like they need to stay under wraps until things are finalized, and trying to find that balance within myself to be okay with people being upset sometimes, or not being able to separate me as Felicia, the person I'm hanging out with Felicia, the executive assistant, who needs to remain confidential. So sometimes that can be a strain.
Ooh, I'm getting the feels listening to all this, because it really speaks very much to my daily struggle too in this work. What about you, Craig? Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time coming up with one. So I guess very quickly, 2 quick things, and neither of them are quick, but I'll make it quick. I think one is prioritizing. We make plans, we go down, we start working on something, and then something in the world happens that affects our campus climate that we have to pivot to.
Yeah.
So I think that happens a whole lot, and particularly in the last 4 years, more than any other time in my career. And is really derails whatever you have to sort of like clear your desk and work what's right in front of you. I would say the other thing, again, very quickly, and it's not quick, but I'll make it quick. I think that for me, given the identities that I have, that I show up with, particularly a number of privileged identities, I also have social group memberships around groups that are marginalized, but people see me as I show up. And I think in doing this work, I think trust is a big thing for me, and that for whatever good reasons, or good, people, we have biases sometimes for lots of good reasons, right? And people who have dealt with other people who might even look like me have good reason to be a little bit less trusting of how I might show up in a room, in a process, in a program. So I think that is something that takes a lot of time and patience. And so I would say that is sort of something that I am constantly measuring, and have sort of like, I don't know, my brain and my heart are both activated around that a lot in the context of the work that I do.
Yeah. I can identify a little bit with, so I'll share a little bit of all of your stories about mine. And what I struggle with is people, I've been educated to the point where I think a lot of my code switching, a lot of the essence of who I am and what I'm concerned about in equity and justice, particularly class issues and staff issues and socioeconomic issues, are there because I grew up poor and working class, right? And I came to higher ed really late. I often share that I was a union butcher 30 years ago, and didn't dream that I'd have an academic, career. But fortunately went to a CSU that saved me by mentoring really, really heavily and saying, even though you're an older student, we think you need to go on and get a doctorate and enter academic affairs. And so I think about our roles is what these faculty did for me, these faculty of color, which is to show us possibilities that we never even knew about or dreamed about were possible. That happened for me, and that was the greatest gift that ever happened to me. Now, I was heavily mentor dictated to. I was told, you're going to go to graduate school. I know you're older. You haven't thought about that, but we're going to do everything we can to get you in, and here are all the schools you should apply to. This is the GRE and all this stuff. And I remember thinking, what, but I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that I know that they made an impact on my life. And I know that all of us want to have that kind of impact and work hard to have that impact on students and staff and faculty and our colleagues. So anyways, but yes, so a lot of times when I have moments where I know that I am privileged, but I also have moments where I have tremendous grief, in really parallel grief for how people are treated, right? And so it's really hard sometimes to carry that with you, day in and day out. So yeah. Okay. So to ask you other questions. When you think about the work on our campus, there's only 5 of us. So we can't do everything and be everything for everybody. So collaboration plays a really important part in our work. And so would love for you to talk about what makes you good at collaboration? Like, what in your life has inspired you to really gravitate towards collaboration? I see all of you as being very collaborative. I mean, I can't, and it's not my job to track all of the different working relationships and things that you're working on campus, but I know that all of us serve in advisory capacities. We serve on committees. We're asked to be on search committees. We're asked to be in all kinds of situations because we're all collaborative, right? But if you could just talk a little bit about, what about you inspires you to approach work in a collaborative way? And is it necessary in this type of work? So we'll just go around the horn and start with Patience.
I think my previous work in student conduct, I always say student conduct is one of those functional areas. It touches everyone from the folks who live across the street next to a fraternity house down to the custodial staff and in between. on campus. So I come from a collaborative background where collaboration is how we made change and how we supported students through some tough times. And coming into this role as a brand new role, my job is to advocate for faculty, staff, and students. And I don't have the day-to-day contact as some of my colleagues in other departments do. So I do rely heavily on the block, student involvement, African American studies, and my colleagues' academic affairs to let me know what's happening. I have been very honored to be welcomed into the Black Spartan Council, Advisory Council, Black Faculty Student Staff Association as well, because I think as a people, we are collaborative, we are a community, we seek community, and I think we're realizing that we need each other to succeed. I couldn't do this work without the 5 people on this screen, as well as our folks over there in community government relations help me connect directly to community. Thank Jamal and Edwin have connected me to San Jose as well as a city. So I couldn't do this job without collaborations. Nothing happens in a silo. I think in ODI, we are here for the campus and for the city of San Jose. So collaborations all the way.
Great. Thanks. Fernanda?
Yeah, I think that I was just reminiscent of my time in student affairs, because my office was an office of one. It was basically me in the office of the vice president for student affairs as director of campus and community relations. And I was putting events like the ALAS conference, the Advanced Latino Achievement and Success conference, that brought over 3,500 people to campus every 2 years, families with their kids from elementary school, middle school, and high school, who were participating in different over 65 to 70 workshops that we were offering, that were that were given in Spanish and in English. And for that to actually work, it was a group work. It was collaboration. It was from people from campus, from admissions to financial aid, from the College of Education to people in the community, the Santa Clara County Office of Education, to the school districts, the principals in the schools that were participating, sending their kids with their families, to the city of San Jose too, because we had a partnership with the city as well, and several foundations like the Silicon Valley Educational Foundation. So, and the Mexican consulate too. So it was just bringing a lot of people to the table, and we always had the whole thing in mind of college going culture, having these families feel that San Jose State is their place. The students, visualizing themselves in a few years on this campus, in the classrooms, sitting where the college students are sitting on a Saturday full of activities that were just geared towards them and their family. So I think that actually spoke about the work that I did for over 10 years.
Great. Thank you, Fernanda. Craig, collaboration.
Boy, oh boy, I think it's really hard to do this work solo, right? For a variety of reasons. We're looking, a lot of, I would say a third of the work is relationship building, relationship maintenance. So I don't know what it is about me answering your original question, but I do think that in order to create change on a campus or in an organization writ large, for one person to do it alone, I think it's impossible. But there's also, I think about critical race theory, about these ideas around sort of like converging interests as something that is a way to connect with other folks on things that we can work together on, and make change together on, particularly when our interests do converge. So I think that's really important, and like maybe a super hyper local like reason also, particularly when I think about like from my own perspective, given my own identities, I can't do this work alone. We would like, and I talked earlier about building trust. If I'm not able to build relationships and maintain relationships over time in doing this work, that trust would be violated if I were to go it alone. So, that's somewhat, yeah. So I don't know. I'll shut up. I'll stop there. But yeah, I think it's impossible. I think it's impossible to do it alone.
Thanks, Craig. Felicia, collaboration.
I think I can honestly credit my sorority with teaching me the value of collaboration. The process to join, there's no way you could do it on your own. And not to say I couldn't do group work and stuff before when I was younger, but at 19 years old, I learned life lessons from that group of women who are lifelong friends, who I could call to drop of a dime for anything. We worked on so many kinds of projects. And we spent a lot of time together studying all kinds of stuff. Even after I was a member, like, you couldn't do what we needed to do as a small chapter at a predominantly white school by yourself. There was no way. Like, we had to collaborate. We reached out to all kinds of organizations. And I learned a lot of that from some of my sorors. So that perpetuated. And I've always thought, if I can figure this out, or if I have this idea, who can help me implement it? And vice versa. If somebody has an idea and I have resources. So when I came to San Jose State, one of the first things I did was like, okay, there aren't that many Black people here. So where are we? And I started looking for us and trying to find connections, learn about the institution, just get information about where people are, what resources I could have. And as I met people, I just, made a little check mark, kept a little note. This person is good at this. This person knows this. And if I could be a resource for them, I offered, reach out and let me know if there's something. And that's just something that stayed with me. And it would be impossible to do the work we have here with just 5 of us and 40,000 people. There's so many offices also that are focused on certain aspects of this work that it would be remiss if we did not include them when we're trying to do our work. They have resources we don't. I mean, this office is 5 years old, so it would be in the 100 and I forget how many years now, 80 something years that this institution has been around. There are some people who've been here a good chunk of that time. So, Yoshida has been here for a very long time. So if we needed to find out information about internment or about judo or anything like that, and we didn't think, oh, let's check and see what Yosh has, it'd be crazy, right? So it just makes sense to me that at an institution of higher learning, that you make sure you're learning from other people. And so I make sure that I let people know where I am, what I'm doing. And when I have something that I think will be of interest to them, I offer it out so that they are like, oh, okay, this person is sharing information and is willing to collaborate or willing to help me. And they're more willing to help me as well when I need something. So yeah, it's just stuck with me through college and into my adult life.
Great. I think we have time for one more question to do around robin. So this question is going to be about your own learning. So one of the gifts, I think, of working at a place like San Jose State, which is a very large public university and actually reflects a lot of the, I would say, the diversity and the issues, I think, in terms of people actually being informed or having very strong ideas about what their needs are in terms of specific to different communities, right? So we have a very vibrant Latinx community, a very vibrant LGBTQ community, certainly large immigrant community, Black community, maybe might be smaller, but it certainly has been here for a very long time with many established institutions. We have people who are white, we have Christians, we have Muslims, we have Jews, we have Buddhists. There are, refugees. There are, people who are unhoused. There are so many different people. There's also the tech economy, right? So we've got this sort of wealthier upper middle class, some of whom are not necessarily from this region and who come and settle here. So it's a very dynamic place to live in Silicon Valley or to work here at San Jose State. Can you tell me, how do you approach learning about groups and experiences that are radically different than your own or your focus in terms of your work and responsibilities? So being in DEI, working in DEI-B, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, is something that's challenging because, we can't ever have a staff big enough to represent all different identities on our staff with all different issues. But we need to have some literacy. So can you talk a little bit about for those out there who are wanting to learn more, how to be an ally, how to learn about other communities and stuff? What has been your journey in trying to gain, literacy and understanding, as well as maybe not necessarily expertise, but at least enough information so that you can be of help on equity issues? So I'll open it. This is kind of a harder question, so I'll open it up to whoever wants to speak first. And of course, this is the last question, and we're a little bit running short on time. So try to be as brief as possible without being so brief that we don't hear understand what you're trying to get at. So.
I'll start. For me, I think it's about exploration, and as long as you're genuine, you can ask people questions. When I don't know something or I have questions about a group, I have found that when I ask or reach out, people are happy to tell you about an issue or culture, explain more. In grad school, we had to intentionally expose ourselves to cultures that were different than our own. And so I knew someone that I worked with who was gay, and I was like, hey, I have this assignment and I have no idea where to start. And he was like, okay, let's go to a gay club. And he just took me out. I met a bunch of his friends. He was open to talking about whatever. He's like, ask me questions. And so I think sometimes if you give people an in to let them know that you're interested and that you're genuine in your interest, then they are happy to talk to you. I've had groups reach out for assistance, and I start with, tell me about you. Tell me about what you need. Tell me what's going on, so that I have some perspective, and I try to be as open as possible. Even if I don't necessarily agree with their stand, I try to understand it. And I think intentionally exposing myself is the best thing that I can do. When we're out on campus and all the tables are out, stop and ask some of the questions that you have. Don't just look, but speak, and people are happy to tell you, especially in this environment, in the educational environment.
Great, thanks, Felicia.
Growing up in Miami, I grew up knowing that even though you all may look the same, definitely not the same. And I carry that with me. I'm a consumer of information, but it also means I have to do my homework. I consider myself a lifelong learner. And one of the things I love about working in higher education is I have access to a library, free resources, people, humans. I can ask questions. I know the responsibility is on me to do the work. So even though I identify as a Black person, I am not a Black person from California. I am not a Black person from the Bay Area. So coming to San Jose, I knew I had to do the work to get to know individuals from the Bay Area and have those conversations about what it's like to live in San Jose or live in the Bay, and continue to do the work. I tell you, take advantage of the resources you have as a faculty, staff, student on this campus. And the benefit of that I love about our library, it's also a city library. So we have double the access to things, resources. You have an amazing staff and faculty over there in the library who can do amazing work and pull anything that you need. And we are also a resource. If you're afraid to go and ask someone else, we're probably the most confidential people we could ask about those type of things without getting weird, because this is our job. So we definitely recommend, if you're afraid to ask other people, reach out to our office.
Can't guarantee we won't be weird when we're answering.
I mean, we are naturally, but you know.
No, thank you. Yep. Who'd like to go next?
I will. So I think that when I met Kathy and she started talking, I think the first time I met Kathy was her presentation when she applied for the job, and she did this presentation on campus and talked about cognitive empathy. And I have never heard that term. And then after I started working with her, I really got to, something that really caught my attention, because I as a person who, has some social identities. I had some empathy to certain people, right? Because I had the same experiences, but really this part of cognitive empathy really caught my attention because it was working at learning about something that is perhaps not my own experience in a way that I understand it so well that I can actually explain it to somebody else in how that person will feel it. And I think that that I apply that kind of methodology to all the things that that either cross my path or actually I'm interested. So I was very, very, very lucky to work with some students in student affairs that were undocumented, and they taught me their experience because, again, I was very privileged. I had no idea what their struggles were, but you don't only, you don't get those opportunities. And at the same time, it's kind of hard for somebody who has that oppressed identity to explain to you, right? So the other way to do it is to learn through media, through books, through presentations. So what I'm doing right now is I consume all sorts of media. So I do a lot of reading, but at the same time, I do a lot of for example, Instagram posts that get me to know new people. The university had this amazing person that I was already following, Alok Menon, last year. And they actually was talked about the gender binary and non-conforming, being non-binary person. And for me, those were things that I was not familiar. So I have become somebody who has been consuming a lot of that information. And I think that's, for me, that's the way kind of like I approach the issues on how to get to know more about the stuff that we work in the office to understand our population even better.
Thank you. Craig?
It's a great question. I think there's some similarities with Felicia's story. I think thinking about how I've thought about this over time throughout my career, not to oversimplify it. And I think that like another third of this work is showing up. And apply that very broadly, showing up in the context of a one-to-one, a conversation with another person, showing up to events on campus that are important to different communities, showing up to or stepping up to maybe a committee that maybe you haven't had maybe it's not a part of your necessarily central to your work or central to even your identities, right? So I think showing up at different things, or use that phrase sort of very broadly, I think is a way in which I have throughout my career and currently try to use. I'm not trying to make it sound oversimplistic, but to be able to you've got two ears and one mouth. So like part of showing up for me is also shutting up and listening to what is happening in a room, in a meeting, in a process, to try to learn as much as possible. And I think that also, I'm linking my answers now, going back to building trust, I think that is really important as well, to be able to show up in authenticity, show up as honest, and show up open, are some of the ways in which I've been able to, I guess, throughout my career, throughout my life, in ways to try to expose myself, to put myself in different sort of places to learn more. So I'll stop with that.
Great. I'll just add, love what you've all said, that learning about other groups that are different than yours also, and I know you all know this, requires a degree of humility, right? It's really understanding that I'm never going to know exactly how you feel because I'm not you, but that I have a deep interest as well in trying to make whatever conditions you're living under better, right? And so it's necessary in some ways to do your own research and to do the heavy lifting of learning, so that the the interventions you offer or the advice or the coaching you offer is not generic, because it isn't one size fits all, right? And I think people often want that, and it's tempting to do that, but we all know, of course, which is why a lot of our work takes so much time. It's really prepping ourselves to understand the specificity of what people are experiencing, as well as who you are, right? And when you enter that space. And so all of that requires a lot of attention and work. And so appreciate all of you in the work that you do in our office and on our campus and in your communities too. So I'm gonna wrap this up. This has been delightful for me, and I think for all of you probably to hear each other answer these questions. We certainly did this with the purpose of having those that we serve understand us a little better, and those that we collaborate with, and then those who might be seeking careers in this area or are interested in this work. But also I think the additional benefit has been that we've gotten to know each other a little better and what makes us tick. And, we don't have the time to do this because of our busy schedules. And so it's really a treat to hear you all speak. So thank you very much for all that you do. We rock. We have a great team. I really do appreciate the hard work day in and day out that we have done, especially in the transition to online and now back towards campus again, as we go into more like hybrid, as well as some face-to-face things. It's been a challenge for all of us, but appreciate the enthusiasm and energy and intellect and fierceness that you bring to this work. So thank you.